Kicking off at number 5, spiders in Dallas. And if you're an arachnophobe, make sure to look away now, because this one's going to get a little bit hairy. Picture this, an entire forest covered in a thick, enormous spider's web. Back in 2007, residents of Dallas, Texas were horrified to find something lurking in a nearby forest. It was pretty uncanny timing, really, considering that it was Labor Day weekend, and this particular attraction unwittingly attracted over 3,000 visitors. Initially, it was thought that the web had been created by a gigantic species of spider that had yet to be discovered, but it was actually found to be a blanket of many webs created by millions of tiny spiders that had infested the forest. Eventually, scientists discovered that the web was created by 11 different species of spider, the most prevalent being the Guatemalan long-jawed spider, which already sounds terrifying enough. It was discovered that this gigantic web was the result of a mass dispersal event, millions of tiny spiders floating through the atmosphere to ride air currents following an unusually wet summer. I don't know what's more terrifying, the thought of a floating cloud of spiders, or the thought of taking a stroll in the woods and getting caught up in Aragog's literal summer house.
Number 4, the Yotune. Watch your back, stay away from trees with sharp branches if you ever think you've encountered one of these Nordic nature spirits. If you're not careful, you might end up as a gruesome sacrifice. Known to many as a son of Loki, this beast man thing has a shape-shifting capability and is generally pretty ambiguously defined. Often when someone is referring to a Yotune, they could be talking about a giant, or a troll, or a number of other large mythical monsters. However, today I want to make pretty sure that we are clear in defining it as a malicious, sacrifice-seeking shapeshifter. There are many Yotune out there, but it is best to be prepared for the worst of the bunch. If you've ever seen David Bruckner's movie The Ritual, you already know how horrifying Yotune can truly be. In the movie, 4 friends go on a hiking trip in Sweden in honor of their dead friend. One of them injures their knee and they're forced to take a shortcut through an unmapped forest. Always a bad call, guys, come on. Haven't you ever watched a horror movie? During their time in the woods, they come across an eviscerated deer hanging from a tree. One of the friends wakes up with unexplainable injuries, and they even find another friend praying in the nude to a wooden statue without ever realizing it. Very soon after this, 2 of the friends are taken and killed by the Yotune. The other 2 friends discover a body as they come across a village of Yotune worshippers. This is where the real scary stuff starts. They find out that the villagers sacrifice people to the Yotune in exchange for immortality and trap the 2 remaining friends. During an attempted escape, the beast reveals its shape-shifting abilities by luring one of the men with a facsimile of his wife. Then its true form is revealed, a massive, 8-legged, partially human, partially beastly, shambling monstrosity with huge antlers and bony human arms. Ready to hear how one of the protagonists gets killed? The Yotune reaches out with these bony human arms and impales the man on a sharp tree branch, leaving him to bleed out. Ouch. Coming across one of these guys in the woods means you'll likely meet the same fate. You might think that due to the size of it, it wouldn't be too fast. Well, you'd be wrong. It is extremely fast and will know the forest like the back of its terrifying hands. It's not a nature spirit for nothing. As a son of Loki, it is an excellent trickster as well, and will take the form of whatever it needs to hunt its prey. Loki seriously got around, huh? Fathering murderous forest beasts. Jeez. The impaling upon tree branches has a bit of a Norse background as well. If you've ever studied Norse mythology, you'll know that Odin hung himself from the world tree, Yggdrasil, and was impaled upon the spear in order to learn the secrets of rune magic. It's possible that the Yotune is impaling creatures and humans alike on trees as sacrifices to Odin himself. That's hardcore, but you wouldn't want to be on the receiving end. I also mentioned it having 8 legs earlier, which may remind you of another creature in Norse mythology, Sleipnir, Odin's 8-legged horse. It's all coming together. However, unless you're a Norse god yourself, I would recommend staying away from this one, and unless you like getting impaled on trees. It's your life, I guess.
Next up at number 3, an injured rock climber. Now, this story is insane. Back in 2014, 2 hikers, Brendan Vega and Sayla Williams, headed along a trail in Santa Barbara, California, but their inexperience soon showed and the rocky terrain was much more treacherous than they'd planned for. As it was getting dark, they tried to find a way back to their car, but in a turn of panic, Williams fractured her left leg when jumping from a rock. Things quickly got worse. Their cell phones were dead, they hadn't brought flashlights, and a pitch black evening was quickly descending. Vega tried to carry his injured companion, but he fell, shattered his glasses, breaking his elbow and breaking her ankle. It was a literal nightmare, and the pair planned for Williams to stay put while Vega went to get help. He was never seen again. Williams lay in agony throughout the night, screaming until her lungs gave out. No one answered her cries, that is until the next morning when 3 other hikers stumbled upon the scene. They didn't know it at the time, but as they snapped some pictures of the beautiful scenery, they had actually photographed Williams' bright red hair as she lay silent in agony. And then they saw her delirious, tucked away behind a rock. Thankfully, in a crazy turn of events, they managed to save Williams' life. If it wasn't for her dyed hair, they may have never noticed her. Swinging in at number 2, evidence in a missing persons case. And this really is a deeply tragic case that is still shrouded in mystery to this day. In 2014, 2 Dutch students, Chris Kremers and Lisanne Froon, set out on a hike out in the deep jungle of Panama and were tragically never seen again. After not returning to the family they were staying with, the family began searching the areas around their home but found no sign of the girls. After contacting the authorities, an aerial search of the forest as well as a foot search with the help of local residents went underway. The Dutch police soon joined the investigation, but after 10 days of solid searching, there was no sign of the girls. After 10 weeks, the authorities slowed down their efforts, which is when a local woman came forward with a blue backpack that belonged to one of the girls. Inside, amongst other things, were both of the girls' cell phones, which contained several mysterious images of their last known location. It is theorized that the images captured on camera were taken to utilize the phone's flash feature in an attempt to light their path in the darkness. 2 months later, the girls' remains were discovered, but it raised more questions than it did answers. Some of the bones were blindingly white, as if they had been bleached, and they had no marks to suggest signs of trauma. Whatever happened to these girls we may never know, yet it remains to be a tragic story of the dangers of the wilderness. And finally, at our number 1 spot, Squamish, British Columbia.
Snowwind, like it's no big deal. I don't.
And god damn it, real or fake, I just absolutely love this video. I'm not saying it's necessarily proof of the existence of the Sasquatch, but the fact that no human can move that fast uphill while walking through 3 feet of snow is pretty damn startling. Back in 2014, Miles Lamont was hiking through Squamish, British Columbia, while he and a friend camped at the side of the Tantalus mountain range. There, they captured a large bipedal figure 7,000 feet below them, making its way across the low ravine. Granted, the skeptics in all of us could find an explanation for this video, the easiest being, it's just an elaborate prank, or it's a lost hiker who just so happens to be incredibly physically fit and able to cover difficult terrain in unusually quick fashion. You see, the fact that the creator of this video is skeptical from the off, yet still accepts the conclusion that this may be evidence of an undiscovered species is pretty telling in itself. I'm not saying it's Bigfoot, but there's no denying that something doesn't quite add up in this video. Well, what do you guys think? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below.
Coming in at number 5, we have Alice Keitler. Dame Alice Keitler was the first recorded person condemned for witchcraft in Ireland. Alice was born in the county of Kilkenny in Ireland in 1263 and had been married a total of 4 times. In 1302, Alice and her second husband were accused of killing her first husband, but due to her vast wealth and involvement in money lending, these accusations were dropped. When her fourth husband John Lepar fell ill in 1324, he expressed the suspicion that he was being poisoned by his wife. After his death, the children of John and Alice's past husbands accused her of using poison and sorcery. Along with these allegations, she was also accused of denying the faith of Christ and the church, cutting up animals to sacrifice to demons at crossroads, holding secret nocturnal meetings in churches to perform black magic and undermined and overpowered the church, using sorcery and potions to control Christians, the murder of her past husband, and the possession of Robin Artisan, a lesser demon of Satan. Richard de la Dread, the Bishop of Ossory, sought to uphold the laws of the church and morality, so when the case of Alice Keitler came across him, he began an even larger project of addressing witchcraft. Richard made many attempts to have Alice arrested due to the many allegations against her and her use of witchcraft and black magic, but But because of having powerful friends in the delay of the trial, Alice was able to flee, and it's believed that she fled to England but could never be found and arrested. Some of the people who were said to be working with Alice were captured and stood trial, one of them being one of her servants, Petronilla de Met, who confessed to working with Alice in such things like committing heresy, sacrificing to demons, making love and hate potions to corrupt the church, engaging in a affair with a demon, and murdering her past husband. Alice was dark and manipulated many people around her to follow her and participate in witchcraft, and to this day it's not confirmed where she fled, but when she did, she was never seen again.
Coming in at number 4, the Patterson-Gimlin footage. Perhaps one of the most divisive pieces of paranormal footage ever captured, which has resulted in decades worth of authentication and debunk attempts, and held up as the most important piece of evidence for believers of Bigfoot. The Patterson-Gimlin tape, captured way back when in 1967 by Roger Patterson and Robert Gimlin, appears to show clear footage of a large ape-like creature covered in hair and startled by two men. Bigfoot. The footage was filmed in Northern California alongside Bluff Creek, a tributary of the Klamath River near a remote logging road. For decades, the exact location of the site was considered lost, overgrown with dense foliage, but was rediscovered in 2011 and is held as a sacred site by Bigfoot enthusiasts across the planet. As the story goes, Patterson and Gimlin were riding their horses through the dense forest when they came upon the creek and startled the creature as it crouched by the water. I mean, it's pretty clear footage, and as I see it, it's either an elaborate hoax or a person in a costume, or it's actual definitive evidence of a species that lives out in the wilderness. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Coming in at number 3, we have Merga Bien. Merga Bien was a German woman convicted of witchcraft and perhaps the most famous of the victims in the Fulda witch trials in 1603 to 1605. Merga was born in the city of Fulda, and she'd been married a total of 3 times and was the heiress of her first 2 husbands. In 1588, she had married her final husband, Blasius Bien, and moved to the city, but eventually returned after an apparent conflict with her husband's employer. At the time, Prince Abbot Balthasar von Dürnbach, who had returned to power in 1602 after a long exile, ordered an immediate investigation of witchcraft in the city, after multiple reports and sightings. While in power, there were over 200 people who were executed for witchcraft in witch trials that lasted until his death in 1605. In March of 1603, the investigations resulted in the first wave of arrests in the city. On June 19th, Marga was arrested and put into jail after signs of being involved with the devil and having supernatural abilities. Her current husband pointed out she was pregnant, but still that did not matter. It was actually believed that her current pregnancy was the result of intercourse with the devil himself. While in jail, she confessed to the murder of her second husband and her children with him, and one of the member of her husband's employers, and that she had taken part in the Sabbath of Satan. Bien was convicted of witchcraft soon after her confession and was burnt alive at the stake in Fulda in late 1603, and to this day she is still known as being one of the most dominant witches in Germany. In at number 2, we have Marlin Mottstata. Marlin Mottstata was a Swedish witch from 1613 to 1676. She is known as one of the few people in Sweden confirmed to have been executed by burning for witchcraft, and the only one to be executed by this method during the famous witch hunt known as the Great Noise in Sweden during 1668 to 1676, which had ended with her execution. Since 1668, a national witch hunt raged throughout Sweden ever since the accusation of Marit Jonsdotter, resulting in the establishment of witch commissions around the nation and execution of around 280 people. The accused showed signs of being witches, along with abducting children to the witches' Sabbath of Satan in Blockula. Marlin Mottstata was among the accused, and not much is known about her background, but what we do know is that she had been married a couple of times and had 2 daughters with her first husband, Eric Nilsson. She was also known to work as a midwife and was actually hired by a woman named Anna Zippel, who actually accused of witchcraft as well and had been executed for being a witch. It's later found that Anna taught Marlin the ways of witchcraft and sorcery. In 1676, Marlin was reported for witchcraft by her 19-year-old daughter, Maria. Marlin was brought to trial for the accusation as her daughter Maria testified against her mother, stating that she had taken her and several other children to Satan in Blockula, and that Satan himself, known to the children as the Mean One, appeared in court with horns standing next to her mother, holding her skirt, and whispered in her ear never to confess. Marlin was ordered by the court to fall on her knees and pray, or be able to confess, but she didn't obey. Along with Maria, 10-year-old and 7-year-old both testified to have been abducted by Marlin to Blockula to see Satan. A woman named Gertrude also also testified against Marlin, stating that she had abducted her family to Satan 16 times and even another 14 times while she was in prison. Also, she had seen her family endure fits while being supernaturally beaten by Marlin from prison. Marlin's firm denial of these crimes was seen as a sign that the devil assisted the witch to withstand interrogations. Finally, in July of 1676, Marlin was found guilty and sentenced to be executed. And finally, in at number 1, we have the Salem witches. The most well-known cases of witches in history, and you may have heard of them, are the witches from Salem. The Salem witch trials of 1692 are still widely talked about today. Witchcraft scared a lot of people throughout history. The thought of people possessing supernatural powers was widely talked about, and many people were accused and labelled as witches. The Salem witch trials in particular were a series of hearings and prosecutions of people who were accused of witchcraft in colonial Massachusetts between February 1692 and May 1693. More than 200 people were accused of possessing such abilities. A total of 30 people were found guilty, and 19 of them were executed by hanging. Among the 19 killed were 14 women and 5 men. Also, of the 200 accused, many were sent to jail, and at least 5 of them died there. Arrests were made in numerous other towns beyond Salem, like in Andover and Topsfield. The trials for the so-called capital crime were conducted by the Court of Oyer and Terminer in 1692, and by a Superior Court of Judicature in 1693. Both were held in Salem, where the mass hangings took place. This was the deadliest witch hunt in the history of colonial North America. Only 14 women and 2 men had been executed in Massachusetts and Connecticut during the 17th century who had been accused of witchcraft. Among the accused were Elizabeth Hubbard and also Dorothy Good, who were also accused of witchcraft. In February of 1692, Betty Parris and her cousin Abigail Williams, who were the daughter and niece of a respected Reverend Samuel Parris, started acting strangely, and would have fits described as beyond the power of epileptic fits or natural disease to affect by Minister John Hale. The girls screamed, threw things around the room, uttered strange sounds, crawled under furniture, and contorted themselves into odd positions according to eyewitness accounts. The girls also complained of being pinched and pricked with pins, but when they went to a doctor, he could find no physical evidence of any ailments on either girl. After the news of these odd behaviors started spreading around Salem, other young girls began experiencing similar behaviors. No one had any idea of where these strange behaviors were coming from, or why the girls were acting in such an odd way. Massachusetts was a very religious town back then, and these girls were acting as if an ungodly being was inside of them. And so they had been accused of witchcraft, and many historians debate on how many of these 200 accused were actual witches, but some definitely were, and they had brought fear to the people of Salem. Coming in at number 5, we have the Wendigo, also referred to as the Wetico. This is a mythological man-eating creature or evil spirit from the folklore of the Native American Algonquin tribes, based in the northern forests of Nova Scotia, the east coast of Canada, and the Great Lakes region of Canada. It is a monster with characteristics of a human, or even a spirit who has possessed a human being and made them monstrous. It has been referred to as a possessing force that makes a person want to eat human flesh, found mostly in areas with a shortage of food in the wintertime. However, there are more than just one variant. The second is a Northern Ghoul variant. A person who eats human flesh becomes the Wendigo, rather than eating flesh because they were possessed by the Wendigo. This can oftentimes be depicted as a floating humanoid figure that moves quickly with the wind, with a starved figure and a distended belly because they're always starving for more human flesh. Now, the third variant is more recent, linking descriptions of Bigfoot or Yeti with the Wendigo myth, where it is a mix between human and furry. Regardless of the variant, the Wendigo is on the hunt for human flesh, making you, a mere wanderer in the woods, their prime target. In at number 4, we have Agnes Samson. Agnes Samson was a Scottish healer and a witch. She was involved in the North Berwick witch trials in the later part of the 16th century. Agnes lived in East Lothian, Scotland, and was considered to have healing powers and worked as a midwife. In the summer of 1590, King James VI was on a voyage from Denmark to Copenhagen after marrying Anne of Denmark, and on their way home a storm arose, and this made James believe the storm wasn't a coincidence. He believed that many people had unusual abilities and was greatly perplexed of the idea of witchcraft and black magic. So he began a witch hunt in Denmark, which was where the Copenhagen witch trials were started by the Danish admiral Peter Munk by King James's request. By the autumn of 1590, Scotland was aflame with witch hunts, and many of those sent to trial were questioned by the king himself. Agnes was accused of being a witch by Gillis Duncan and was arrested along with others, and she was questioned heavily about her role in the storm raising. Agnes eventually confessed and her body was shaved to reveal a witch's mark. Agnes Samson had made a charm that she was able to raise a storm and change the winds. She confessed to causing a storm that drowned Jane Kennedy in September of 1589, when ferry boats collided during a sudden storm started by Agnes. The same charm raised the storm and weather effects that threatened the king on his return voyage from Denmark in 1590. King James actually was the one to interview Agnes and was very convinced of her guilt. She was convicted of witchcraft and was sent to be executed. She had been taken to a scaffold on Castle Hill where she was strangled and then burnt at the stake in January of 1591. It is believed and seen by many locals that the naked ghost of a bold Agnes is said to roam in the palace of Holyrood House, haunting the people there. Coming in at number 3, the Dullahan, also known as the original Sleepy Hollow. The Dullahan is a headless rider, usually on a black horse, who carries his head under his arm. Now, although the Dullahan is typically male, there have been some female versions throughout folklore. The mouth is usually in a hideous grin that reaches both sides of the head. Think the Joker and you're on the right track. Not only that, but his eyes are constantly moving about and can see across the countryside, even during the darkest of nights. It has been said by those who have reported sightings that the flesh of the head is the colour and consistency of mouldy cheese, which as a dairy intolerant person is revolting to me, just saying. The Dullahan uses the spine of a human corpse for a whip, and its wagon is adorned with funeral objects, e.g. candles and skulls to light the way. The spokes of the wheels are made from the thigh bones, the wagon's covering made from the worm-chewed pal or dried human skin. Now here's where things get spooky, especially for anyone tracking through the dark woods. When the Dullahan stops riding, that is when a person is due to die. The Dullahan will then call out the person's name, at which point that person will immediately perish. Now even more terrifying still, there is no way to bar the path against a Dullahan. All locks and gates open to them when they approach. They also do not appreciate being watched while on their errands, throwing a basin of blood on those who dare to do so. You have been warned.
At number 2, we have Skinwalkers. In Navajo lore, Skinwalkers are known as he who walks on all fours, powerful medicine men and witches who have acquired various supernatural powers through terrible means. Shapeshifting is one of their most well-known attributes, most commonly taking the forms of coyotes, crows, bears, wolves, cougars, and owls. They also have a tendency to appear as unspeakable chimeras with hideous amalgamations of both human and animal features. Skinwalkers begin as humans who place terrible curses upon themselves through rituals of pure evil. They're required to commit terrible atrocities, grotesqueries, and grave taboos. This can often require the killing of a family member or a loved one. When all is said and done, they're infused with the insidious curse and the awful powers that come with it. Once a Skinwalker, they are often banished from their tribes for submitting to evil and left to walk the badlands and forests forever. As they traverse the wastes, they are often seen as animalistic, even in their human forms. Also, they will often travel naked. If they weren't scary enough already, there's a chance you'll come across a nude, ungodly abomination in the woods. Yikes. These monsters are extremely strong and agile in addition to their magical powers. They can use their abilities to mesmerize, instill fear, sow confusion, and even take control of another's body for a short period of time. On top of this, they're extremely difficult to kill. Unless you know their original name or have a very specific ash to coat your knife, good luck getting rid of a Skinwalker. There are countless stories of Skinwalkers being terrifying in forests all across North America. One story details the time a duo in Arizona came across a gigantic coyote sitting perfectly still in the middle of the road. It didn't even flinch when they drove by it and started chasing the car afterwards. It was right on the car's tail, even at 50 miles per hour. This obviously freaked the passengers out, but what happened next was absolutely bone-chilling. The coyote ran alongside the car and looked into the window with human-like eyes. Then it smiled at the driver and let out a screech before running off into the night. Yeah, remind me not to take a late night drive in Arizona. Another Skinwalker story is even scarier thanks to the long-lasting consequences of the encounter. A man and his friend were on a hiking trip and got separated at some point. Hours later they reconnected, but there was something wrong with one of them. He didn't seem to be himself and seemed to not know many details about his own life. Upon returning to the city, the friend who disappeared seemed lost, like he didn't know where he was going. He was dropped off at his house and was never heard from again. This could very well be an instance of a Skinwalker taking over someone's body for a very long time. Whether the friend's body was taken over or if he was killed and replaced by the Skinwalker, it's hard to tell. The prospect of a loved one being taken over permanently by a Skinwalker is blood-curdling indeed. So unless you want yourself or a family member being taken over, I would say avoid Skinwalkers to the best of your ability. Not that you would be able to tell if you were near one.
And finally coming in at number 1, SCP-1000. SCP-1000 is a nocturnal omnivorous ape which ranges from 5 to 10 feet in height and weighs between 200 and 600 pounds. They often have grey, brown, black, red and occasionally white fur and possess large eyes with good vision, with intelligence that is on par with the common chimpanzee.
Now, SCP-1000 evolved alongside humans up until, 10,000, 15,000 years ago, when an extinction event eliminated all but 1 to 5% of their population. This event was triggered by SCP-1000 contracting an anomalous pseudo-disease which can be classified as SCP-1000-F1. This disease is passed on at the genetic level and affects every present-day instance of SCP-1000. Now, the effect of SCP-1000-F1 is as follows. Any humanoid that directly or indirectly observes any instance of SCP-1000 has a minimum 2% chance of being instantly killed through anomalous means via permanent cessation of brain function.
Meaning if you cross paths with an instant of SCP-1000 while alone in the woods, you have a high chance of biting the dust. All media reports related to SCP-1000 are to be examined for potential verifiability, and all organizations and individuals investigating SCP-1000's existence are to be kept under surveillance by Mobile Task Force Zeta-1000 and discredited or administered amnestics.